Well, Happy New Year and welcome to our weekend release of talk and content for you out of Croydon Vineyard Church. I'm Tom, together with Leslie, my wife. We're the senior pastors with Croydon Vineyard, and we love it that you want to be part of our community. Our real yearning and our hope is that what we put out online, these kind of things, which we'll do over the course of this next year again, as we have done last year, enable you to feel connected in to the amazing thing that Jesus is doing in our city, through our church and other churches. We've seen in 2022 a really amazing uptick, I guess, in the move of the Spirit among us. We gathered on the 31st of December for a crossing over from one year to the next. And part of that was just a space to give testimony and to thank God for what he'd done, and just the incredible reality of how Jesus is meeting people, many of whom going through huge, massive things, multiple organ failure, the breakdown and rejection within a marriage, somebody who has had major kind of questions and concerns over whether they even want to go on living. The reality is that Jesus is meeting people like that and changing their lives, giving them hope. One of the people just talked about how hope, there's this overwhelming sense of hope. And so we love it that you can be connected, see a window into a space like this where Jesus, by his grace, it's not down to us, let me tell you that. It's purely Jesus by his Spirit doing what he said he'd do in his kingdom. And we want you to feel connected, because we believe that as you connect to a body that is seeing Jesus breathe on, like dry bones rattling together, you also find yourself getting drawn in to this wonderful adventure, this wonderful advance of the kingdom of Jesus that is taking place. So well done. And we hope and we trust, and our great desire is that you find God meeting you through this content, and not just meeting you in this, but inviting you into something more, inviting you into becoming a player of a wonderful, unique and eternally significant part in the advance of his kingdom. That is his invitation to you. He says to you, I don't just want you to come and receive from me. I want to equip you. I want you to follow me. I want to make you into somebody who plays a unique part. Only you could do this. A unique part for his glory and his purposes on this earth. It's our yearning and our hope that we provide content that enables you to say yes to him in every single part of this extremely baffling and yet unbelievably delightful calling that he's placed on your life and on our life as a community. So what we're going to do this coming year is we're going to release for you the Sunday preaches that we're doing. We believe that God is moving. We've seen him move week in, week out. So we're going to release them for you. So those of you who can't be present on a Sunday, or you just want to hear them again, can actually soak up the goodness and the riches of the gospel of life, the kingdom, as it's disclosed in the scriptures. And as we do our best, we do our best to try and open it up to you. Obviously, this Sunday being the first, this weekend being the first one of the year, we haven't yet got a talk. So here's just a really quick preview of what we feel God is going to do through us and in us in this coming year. As we've been sat and praying and thinking, like, Lord, 2023, what is this year about? We are more and more convinced that Jesus has said to us, he wants us to contend for a spiritual awakening. He wants us to contend, to fight a fight. It doesn't come easily, but to pay a price, to set our face like flint, to say we will contend for an awakening of people's hearts and souls and minds and bodies, that the Spirit of God would move and do things like he did in the Welsh revival in the early 1900s, or the Azusa Street revival, where people gathered, incredibly ordinary people gathered, and the Spirit of God came, and just an incredible awakening took place. the East Africa revival, which is still in many ways going on, the South American revival, the work of God to awaken people in Korea and now China, something that's going on in Iran. We're like, Lord, would that happen here as well? We call on you and we contend for a spiritual awakening. And so that here, just Matthew 25 gives us a little bit of a grid, and this is a sneak preview of what I'm going to be preaching on this next weekend that you'll see released. Matthew 25, this is what Jesus tells, 3 parables of what it looks like to be awakened. The first is the parable of the bridesmaids, and there's bridesmaids or virgins who come waiting for the bridegroom. And what we see when you're awakened, you stop being like one of the bridesmaids who hasn't got oil in their lamp, and you start being like one who has got oil in their lamp. What's this mean? You go from being somebody who's complacent to somebody who's expectant. You know God could show up at any moment. He could just come through the room, as it were. The bridegroom could arrive, and you're like, oh, I'm ready for you, God. I'm looking, I'm attentive, I'm fully expectant. Our prayer is that you this year become somebody who's just always like, I know, God, you could break into this moment and you could just come. I'm expecting you to come. And in the ultimate fulfillment of that, people who think, oh, God one day will come and he will renew all things. And I live so expectant and imbued with that. The second parable is the parable of the talents. We see that there's servants who go and they invest talents, and there's one who doesn't. Jesus is saying when the spiritual awakening comes into your life, you go from being somebody who has silent resentment to somebody who has an overflowing gratitude. The third servant, he just buries his talents in the ground, and he does that because he says, I know you're a harsh man. There's this silent resentment towards God. And the truth is, many of us who feel like we are servants of God, Christians, there's just a slight resentment, a slight cynicism, a slight bitterness is present. And when we're awakened by God, what happens is that it's just blown out the water, and it's immense gratitude. Oh, life is a gift. And this joy just flows within you. Our prayer is that you have that in just immense sense of, oh, you've been so kind to me, so good to me, my God. The third is the sheep and the goats, the parable of the sheep and the goats. And this shows how when you're spiritually awakened, your faith goes from something that blesses very few people, benefits very few. You haven't fed the naked, you haven't fed the hungry, you haven't looked up. Your faith has really had very little tangible difference to other people's lives, to being somebody who just without even realizing it, you're blessing and you're releasing blessing to others. We're praying for a spiritual awakening. We're contending for a spiritual awakening. Here's the thing, in each of these parables, the people who are not awake think they are. They're shocked. They're shocked. We're praying that God would wake those of us who don't realize we're asleep. That God would wake those who don't realize that they're not expectant, they're not grateful, and that they're not releasing blessing. We're praying and contending for that. And the amazing news that we want to offer, and the headline, here's the thing, we want to contend for God to act. We can't do this, but by his Spirit he can act. And just to finish this little preview, I think of it like this. A few years ago, when our youngest was a bit younger than he is now, he would come into in the morning to see me. He wants to see his dad. And if I was asleep, one morning in particular, he came in to wake me up. And he would come in, and I'd be kind of resting in the bed, and he'd grab the duvet and he whipped it off, like in a sudden shock of the moment. Dad! And it's like this, you're in the cozy, warm environment of your duvet, and you're sleeping, and this sort of, it's a horrible, let me just say, it was a horrible experience. And I looked, I think, don't ever do that again. Don't ever do that again. You think there's an emergency, you think somebody's about to die, or there's this dramatic, horrible awakening. And that is not what God wants to do. And I said to him, Nathan, when you want to wake me up in the morning, just come in and just come nice and close and say, Dad, really slowly, Dad, and blow onto my face, and that will wake me up. And so the next day as he came in, he toddled in and he leaned close, Dad, and breathed on my face. And it's like something from outside, his breath woke me up, and it was just this waking, I see now there's the days ahead, and I'm delighted to be stepping into it with him, my son. And that is the kind of awakening that God wants to bring to you. He wants to whisper to you, he wants to call your name, and he wants to breathe his Spirit onto you. Come awake, come on, come do this day with me. Come on, I'm hungry for intimacy, I'm hungry for time with you. Come awake. And so it's our prayer that these resources are just one of many ways that you feel Jesus himself calling you by name, breathing his Spirit upon you, and causing you to be fully awakened into all that he has for you.